topics. So right now we are going to open with paragraph one, and we're going to include in that discussion paragraphs 4 through 10, and actually perhaps a little bit of paragraph 12. And we're going to do that because we are looking for comments in terms of two main components of taking stock: reporting and reviewing. So we're going to guide you through the paragraphs, but we're going to ask that you look at these guiding questions. What is the purpose of taking stock? So what is the overall hope that we would want to get out of taking stock, and what are our purposes for doing so? Mariana, would you actually turn to the paragraph 1 slide, which I believe is the next slide? So here you see that the co-chairs from IP3 have noted three things that came out of that discussion. And then would you go please to slides 4, 5, 6, and 7. So here's slide 4, you'll see paragraphs 4 and where she's scrolling through. These are all paragraphs that relate to reporting. And so that is how we would like to structure the discussion. And what we would like to hear from you is your thinking on what is the purpose of taking stock, which is paragraph 1, and what elements you would want us to think about as the building blocks of our reporting section, how that reported information should be presented, and the progress or the process for reporting. That would be, from our perspective, an excellent beginning of today. So at this time, I think using the process that the Secretariat laid out, which would be using the chat box, or Nalini, if I heard you correctly, also the raise hand function, if you would put into the chat box your name of your organization, followed by your name, and then the Secretariat will, as she noted, in groups of 3, they will open your mics and we will call on you in the order that Nalini and her colleagues present you. So while you're starting to put your names on the list for interventions, I'd like to just cover 2 quick housekeeping meetings. Terrapon noted in the beginning that we are going to be doing a summary of each meeting. We are just in the process of finalizing our summary from the first meeting. That summary, we're going to be looking to find the right balance between enough transparency to capture your discussion, but not so much detail that you don't need to perhaps go back and look at the recording that'll be available on the website. So we hope you're going to leave in our hands that balance. And in that summary, we will be doing our best to present the views that we heard. Sometimes we may do that by organizations or affiliation, and sometimes we might do that as a group, so that there's a general sense. So again, we'll be trying to strike that balance, and we'll look for your trust in us to get that right. Second, we will be using your input today to propose a way forward on sections G and H for our December meeting. We're going to be listening carefully to you, and of course, we will be taking into account the input that we hear from those who are not able to attend our meeting today. So we'd like to begin with paragraphs 1 and paragraphs 4 through 11 on the purpose, the key building blocks, process, and presentation of the reporting components of our sections today. You might also just give a little consideration to looking at paragraph 12, which has a little bit of perhaps replication or duplication of some of the sentiments that are also in paragraphs 4 through 10. Mariana, would you return to slide 2? And again, so this is the slide that lists our guiding questions, and then we will turn to paragraphs 13 through 14 to talk about what mechanisms are needed to review the effectiveness of the reporting. In other words, what is the review process? And then we will go back to paragraphs 2 and 3 about roles and responsibilities. Once you have let us know what you think about what the process should be and how we should take stock. So with that, Nalini, will you let us know, do we have the beginning of a list perhaps on folks that are interested in sharing their views with us?
Oh, sadly, no. But I hope in the next minute or so, we will get a nice list going.
Sure, give folks a minute to get organized.
Yeah. So just a reminder, if in the chat box, you can just enter to all attendees. So just make sure it's going to all attendees, your affiliation, and then followed by your name. The other option is to raise your hand.
So we could also start if we want to move to the slide on paragraph 1, which was slide 3. So this is one of.
Sorry, we have Sarah Coombs from Canada.
Oh, thank you, Sarah, for starting us off, saving me.
Alex,
Sarah, you have the floor.
Alex, could you please unmute Sarah Coombs, Canada?
Good morning, everyone, and afternoon and evening. It's a bright sunny day here in Canada. So I didn't mean to speak first, but since there was a pause, I just have a general statement first, and then one other, and I have a few other comments later, probably as we go through. First, just generally, of course, effective mechanisms for taking stock on progress will be critical to ensure the effective implementation of the Beyond 2020 framework. We would just like to say that any chosen mechanism should be inclusive and transparent and impartial or independent to ensure that they are credible. And we also, with regards to paragraph 1, we would agree that we believe that reporting should be tightly focused on the objectives and targets identified in the 2020 plan, obviously being discussed in another virtual working group, so that the necessary information is collected in a usable format. I do have some comments on kind of the roles and the stakeholders, but I think that's a little bit later down the way. So I just thought I'd get the conversation going.
Yes, thank you. That's perfect. We are going to try to talk a little bit about who should do what after we've had a conversation about what it is that we would like to see done. So thank you. That was very helpful. And maybe I will just add one thought in here as well. Is again, we're not going word for word or sentence by sentence, but I would notice that in B, for example, there does seem to be 2 separate ideas: promote learning improvement and scale up for enhanced implementation, which I read to be, let's look at what we're doing and see if we can do it better or more efficiently, and then support stakeholders to set priorities. Those are 3 sort of separate ideas. And so, you know, as Chair Parnan and I think about how we might do this, that those, and from my perspective, those would be 3 separate ideas that we would be interested in hearing views on, and whether folks agree that these are the general purposes for taking stock. So thank you, Canada.
Okay, next we have Vasilios from Germany and Chris Duku, and they've both been muted. So Vasilios, if I can start with you, please.
Thank you, Naline. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, Madam Co-Chairs and colleagues. My name is Vasilios Karavesiris. I am officer at the Federal Ministry for Environment, and I am representing today the European Union and its member states. Thank you very much for providing the opportunity to share our thoughts on the sections G and H of the compilation of recommendations, and would be very pleased to share. Starting with the first para we have on our display. Before I go into this, allow me to give a rather more general comment on the heading of this section, which reads mechanisms for taking stock of progress. We think it may be easier to just talk about taking stock of progress. This is something for your consideration. It's not perhaps a very substantive point, rather editorial, but we think it facilitates communication. So that said, I have a general comment on the purpose as it is given here. We are generally fine with this, with some editorial amendments. First thing, we would like to see under A, item A, the qualification of strategic objectives, which is the language we use in the sessional process. I think that would be good to insert strategic objectives there. And second, we do think that the two sentences under B could be separated in order to make clearer the distinction, because these are actually two important but distinct elements. So our view on this would be to rearrange item or split item B in two parts. The first part is what it reads there: promote learning, etc. And the second part would become an item C, and that would be to support stakeholders to set priorities. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. It sounds like we are in agreement on the general content of B. Thank you so much, Germany.
Thank you.
Nalini, I'm sorry, I've forgotten who is next.
This is Chris Dussault from UNECE.
Thank you so much, Chris.
I'm working specifically on the protocol on PRTRs. So we have some experiences that might be of use in this context as well. So one of them was that parties that implement the protocol, what they see is that actually a good process in taking stock of the progress is also helping to build the trust in the process itself. So building trust is one important element, I think, could be considered to add. And not only trust in the process, but also a transparent mechanism is also able to increase the trust among the different stakeholders, so that further progress is possible. And the second thought is on taken from the report on measuring progress towards achieving the environmental dimension of the SDGs. It mentions in the recommendations that, for example, PRTRs are ideal tools for integrated analysis of the environment and policy interactions, so that they have the effect of a change in policy related to pollution releases can be analyzed and adaptive measures taken as necessary. So the possibility to actually see a possible effect through the taking stock. What was your taking stock? I'm trying to find the wording you were using. I can't. Yeah, the mechanism actually. So if the mechanism allows to actually see effects in change of policies that are related to this process, then it will be very useful to further improve any adaptive measures taken. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Our next speaker, please.
Okay, so we have next on our list, Jill, followed by Thomas, and then Jacqueline.
Thank you. If before you all start, you would also just note your organization for those of us on the call, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. I'm sorry, I thought I had, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I thought I had identified myself. I hope you can hear me.
I can hear you, and if I'm not mistaken, Jill Hannah, how great to hear from
Yes.
you. So exciting.
Yes. Hi, Carissa, and I hope you've had some sleep in the last 2 days.
Not away.
I'm representing the Global Alliance on Health and Pollution, which is a network of 63 plus governments, UN organizations, developing country governments in particular, with associated UN governments and UN agencies and a number of multinationals and private sector and so academia, research institutes and all sorts. And it's my great honor to be representing this group. I wanted to raise a couple of points. I would agree with the European Union that just calling this taking stock of progress would seem to be more clear. And the proposal to split B, I might wish to be nitpicking about wording and suggest that scaling up would be more correct than scale up. But my main purpose for taking the floor at this stage was, first of all, to stress how much having all stakeholders involved in taking stock of progress, how important that is, which comes later, I think, but which needs to be borne in mind in our language throughout this section. And I'd also like to ask you whether you have thought about how the language here relates to the language on which we are supposed to be providing comments by the end of today, as I understand it, on the earlier sections, where the question of whether or not national reports would be produced and all the rest of it was left rather more voluntary than this language, which talks about should and seems to be, if not compulsory, a bit more expecting everybody to do it. Now, of course, we in GAP would like to encourage as far as possible every organization and every nation to indeed report so that we do know what's going on and so that we can build momentum. But we just think that it may be necessary to look at the language of the two sections together to make sure that they're not giving different impressions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jill. And yes, I think actually maybe this is a good time to just note that this language, as far as I understand it, is language that has been given much attention in terms of the actual words on the page, that at IP3 the discussion was related to perhaps broad concepts and et cetera. So yes, there definitely will be a need for all of us to look carefully at how to reconcile some of the language and the concepts, et cetera. And I think you made our point extremely well that our goal today is to host sort of an open discussion on the concepts such that we can take that look at how we might organize the text, the language, and the concepts to pull them together in an operative way. So thank you for that intervention. Next on our list, I believe, and I'm sorry, again, I'm not doing my job, Nalini, could you help me?
With Thomas Ode Mangu, followed by Jacqueline Alvarez from UNEP. And then we have also Suki from the Ministry of Environment, Japan. So if we can have them in that order, if Alex, you could unmute them.
Thomas, you have the floor.
Sorry, Alex, if you can please give Thomas the floor. If it's not working, if you can move to Jacqueline, please, and we'll just see if we can resolve that issue.
Yes, moving to Jacqueline. Thomas cannot be unmuted at the moment. Jacqueline, please take the floor. Thank you, Nalini.
So thank you. Hope you can hear me. First, I would like to thank the Carissa and also Tarapon for the leadership in these discussions, and for the Secretariat as well, because of the huge amount of work behind the scenes. So thank you for that, and for the opportunity to make a comment in here. We support the suggestion by Germany on behalf of the EU regarding the title of this section G. And we also think that separating B into could be very good for promoting understanding, as well as the UNECE aspects on trust. One general point before I go more into A and B is that taking stock of progress and experience sometimes with multilateral environmental agreements is that it can be seen as a burden. So any mechanism or any process for taking stock really needs to be seen as fitting a purpose and not only assessing progress. So point B for us, it's really important. In relation to point A, it refers to progress against objective and strategic objectives, as the EU was suggesting, and targets. We would like to suggest here to also assess progress against the vision. We still have not been discussing in the virtual group on targets and indicators about how to measure the achievement of the vision, but we believe that if we want to really make progress in the sound management of chemicals and waste, this taken stock should also tell the story about how we are working towards the vision. My last point is regarding the point on support stakeholders to set priorities. We believe it's very important, but we also believe that it can help the future conferences or ICCM to set priorities. So it is, and maybe that this sentence is in a broad manner that can be interpreted, but we would like to have that aspect of priorities by the international community as such, and not only stakeholders, which is of extreme relevance, but concerted actions at the international level might also be needed. So understanding what has happened and what progress have been made will also need to inform future decisions or resolutions by the next conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jacqueline. Zuki from Japan, you have the floor.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, Suki, we can. Thank you.
Hi. Sorry, Dr. Mahmoud is actually asking the floor before me. So, yeah, so please confirm his comment is addressed before me. But I will get going. Thank you very much for everybody's effort. And I know to say, so I will keep it short and simple. So we think that this purpose of stock taking and assessing progress kind of sound duplicated. So we would suggest that the purpose of stock taking progress is to promote learning, improvement, and scale up for so keep it B. But to make it clearer, we would like to add A, monitor the process of implementation, and then B, to evaluate the impact of the post-2020 instrument. So that what the mechanism is doing clearer. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And yes, now we can call on Dr. I can't quite read my screen without my glasses. If we call on Pakistan, Dr. Mahmood from Pakistan, please.
Dr. Mahmoud from SDPI Pakistan is now unmuted. You have the floor.
Seems perhaps we're having a few technical difficulties on that one. Jose, could you maybe work on that? And oh, we cannot hear you, sir. We can see you in the chat, but we cannot hear you.
So perhaps then we can just move on, and we'll try and resolve the technical issues with Dr. Kwaja. We have now next on our list Felix from Switzerland, Anastasia from ICCA, and Andrew Clark from the US. So Alex, if you can please unmute all three colleagues.
It has been done.
And Felix, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you very much. Hello to everybody.
Morning.
I will also start with some general comment, and then later in the discussion, I think we can become more specific. I think also that this reporting is a very crucial element to measure progress and to achieve what we have outlined in the Para 1, and also agree with some of the previous speakers how we could adjust this Para 1 and the title. I think also, as I mentioned by Jacqueline from UNEP, it is very important such a progress or a process is adding value, is fulfilling a purpose. If it's not the case, then we risk that the reporting rate is really low. I think it's really key that it's adding a value also for those sending in the reports and participating. Added value can be different things. Now, it can perhaps be a way to show what we have done. You can also showcase success stories. You can inform about challenges. It's a learning element. And one element that is not mentioned, but in reality is also something that can be helpful, is also in your institution, in your ministry, in your government administration, you can launch a discussion. If I have to be reporting about, I present what we have done, where we stand. This will be helpful for internal ways to do more and to scale up. We actually have experiences from Switzerland. Now we have to do the SDG reporting again, and for sure that's a good case to see where we stand and what we can do better. However, in the current, how it's explained, it's like a one-way stream in my reading. It goes very much from the stakeholders or the parties are reporting to the secretary, to the framework. But the question is what is coming back also. And as I said, a key element can also be that such reporting process can be helpful to get more engagement, more commitment on, for example, a national level. And we have experience with OECD peer reviews, quite success. So that means that you look at a certain element in your implementation, for example, from environmental design management of chemicals and waste. You do agree on what you want to look on. It can be voluntary, but then also you have a higher commitment, perhaps from a political level. Because if then other people, other experts, perhaps even a commission comes to your country looking at certain things, then this might have a higher impact than when just a desk officer fulfills some form on his computer. So we would also like to see to include this concept of peer reviews that could be voluntary on mutual agreed terms and so on as an element to enable and strengthen two-way reporting, like then you report to the secretariat, but you have also the chance to get like a peer review of certain elements of your implementation plan to get a higher political attention and also to get a chance to improve your design with the expertise from outside. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Felix, before we move to Anastasia, I did note that you said you had a few other comments for later. I am just noting the time, and we're going to maybe in 5 minutes or so move to kind of the next sections. So if you have those comments ready while you have the floor, we'd be happy to take those now as well.
Thank you very much. I think they are really detailed ones. I will just submit them in writing as we have this feedback procedure. I think that's the easier way.
So after our December meeting? Okay, that sounds good. Thank you so much. Anastasia, may I turn the floor to you, please?
Sure. Thank you, Carissa. And I think Nalini noted I'm representing ICCA. So I'll be brief. We really support increasing both the reporting rate on taking stock of progress and making sure that the reporting on taking stock of progress assesses the progress against the objectives, targets, as well as the indicators and milestones if those are established. We also note that we need to assess progress both on the overall progress of the instrument, but on the individual stakeholders, so that we can tell, which governments, regions, and stakeholders might need more areas of improvement and enhancement and resources. And that we agree with the suggestions from the EU and others to split, I think, letter B into multiple parts. Thank you.
You're on mute, Carissa. Okay, you got frozen there for a few minutes, a couple of seconds actually, Carissa. So.
I did. I'm sorry. Who's next on our list, Nalini? Thank you, Anastasia.
Okay, so next is Andrew Clark from the US, and then we've actually got Samantha Ross from the UK, and we'll try to give Dr. Paja from SDI Pakistan one more time.
Thank you. Andrew, you have the floor.
Okay, can you hear me now?
We can.
Great, thank you. Thank you for the co-chairs and for the secretariat for putting this all together. I think this is very useful for us to have these discussions. I think with your indulgence, co-chair, I'm going to maybe speak to several parts of this at once with some general comments. I think it might be just more productive for us to go ahead and go through a number of things on the reporting section of section G here. So first of all, I'd just like to say that we believe an efficient reporting system will be an important element of the Beyond 2020 instrument. And it's a crucial part of measuring our progress. And we do think that taking stock of our progress is very important. I will say that on paragraph 1, we do generally agree with the purpose for taking stock that's laid out there. Although I will say I do think that it's a good suggestion from Germany on some paragraph E, as others have noted. We believe reporting should provide sufficient information to be frequent enough to provide us with an accurate picture of what progress we're making, including trends and where we need to improve. But we must also keep in mind that it is important that reporting is not so much of a burden that countries and other stakeholders might struggle to complete it. Reporting will be most useful if we are receiving a high response rate, and we should consider the already existing reporting burdens countries face with the Chemicals and Waste Conventions. And we also want to make sure that reporting does not end up siphoning away resources from implementation. In this regard, while we see many useful elements in the draft text, there are a number of areas where we believe that the text could be streamlined and some redundant language that could be removed. We believe we could also benefit from more clarity in some areas of the text, including the periodic review in paragraph 3 and the process for compiling data in paragraph 5. I think another note for this is, national implementation plans could fit into the reporting process. I think we need to consider how they will. Of course, the countries that do complete them, they will be helpful tools to assist in preparing their reports. But we should note that some countries will decide to create them while others will not. So we take that into account. And we also think that it is important that all stakeholders, not just the countries, report. But we should consider that there may be some differences in what we want to see from the reporting from countries versus other stakeholders. So that should be considered as we design our reporting mechanism. And thank you. That's all I have for now, and I may come back if we get to later issues in the text. Thank you.
if we can now move to the UK, please. We do have, as someone has noted in the chat box, there does seem to be a strong echo in the background, perhaps someone with a dog, which is not me. So if folks could just pay attention to when your microphone is on mute, that would be great. Thank you. And if that, can I turn to the UK, please?
So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Can you all hear me? My name's Samantha Ross. I'm representing the UK in this discussion. I would just like to say that we are very pleased that we're able to make use of this additional time available, and would like to express our gratitude to the Bureau and the Secretariat for all of their work to make this possible. We look forward to the virtual discussions coming up. It's widely recognised, I think, that implementation of the existing framework has been insufficient and that we haven't achieved the goal that we set. So with this in mind, we would just like to consider indicators as a central part of this taking stock of progress on the Beyond 2020 framework, and would therefore like to see this mentioned in the key building blocks needed to take stock of progress section. We would also like to note as a further point in paragraph 1, the purpose should also be to drive progress, not just to assess progress as stated. Thank you.
Carissa, you're on mute.
Yes, thank you. So thank you very much, Samantha. Nalini, I think we were going to perhaps try to reach our colleague in Pakistan next.
Yes, yeah, we'll try one more time.
Thank you.
So Dr. Khwaja, you're on mute. I don't know if you can now try to speak and if we can hear you. So it looks like there's a technical issue. He can hear us clearly, but we can't hear him. Could be his microphone.
Okay, I'm so sorry about that. So we do have a process for those who were not able to participate today. In other words, if you're not joining us on this call, we do have a 10-day window for written input for those folks. And so perhaps we could ask for him to submit during that process, even though he is registered for the call today. I think we could certainly in this case welcome his input in written format, or if he feels it's possible, he could of course use the chat box. We're trying to have a discussion, but obviously we're having some technical issues. So while we, let's move on. Do we have others that want to speak on this? Or if not, I suggest that we perhaps maybe should move on to the next portion of this discussion, which is the sort of the reviewing aspect of taking. Nalini, can I check with you on our speaker list?
No, no one has asked for the floor. And please, as we have been doing for the previous slide question, use the chat box and make sure that the chat is sent to all attendees. So then people know when you want to take the floor. So no one's written in the chat box yet, and I don't see any hands up for now. Should we move? Is it the next slide, Carissa, that we need to move to? You're on mute, Carissa.
My own keys are a little sticky here. Thank you. So yes, I think actually we're moving to slide 6 or 7. I do see, Nalini, that it looks like perhaps we have something in the chat box from our colleague from Pakistan, perhaps. Could you look at that for us, Nalini, while we move forward? And Mariana, one more slide.
So there's a comment for 1A. It says needs clarification on whether progress assessment is with regards to specific national objectives / targets or the SICAM umbrella objectives / target.
We will decide both. Okay, thank you so much for that comment. We will take a look at that. Looks like it's a little bit about just being sure that we're clear on which targets and whether we're looking at the overall or the specific targets in our reporting. Thank you. So actually, I'm sorry, Mariana, would you go one more slide for us, please? Thank you so much. All right, so we have about 15 minutes left before we're going to move to section H, where Tirupran's going to walk us through that next piece of our agenda for today. So these, nope, I'm sorry, it must be one slide longer. I forgot that slide, paragraph 12 is so long. We're looking for paragraphs. There we go. Thank you so much. So we've spent time this morning talking a little bit about reporting aspects of what we might be looking for in terms of messaging and what we want the reporting to accomplish, whom we want it to include, what we would want to see, and ensuring that the reporting allows us to make a reasonable assessment against the objectives, targets, indicators, and milestones. So next, we'd like to turn to what we think were the intentions of paragraphs 13 and 14. And again, we're not looking necessarily at the content of the existing language in 13 and 14, but what we are looking for is a discussion on how we would like the reviewing function of taking stock to work. So as we opened, we noted that taking stock really has two main components. One is reporting, which is what we've been discussing and what paragraphs 1 through 12-ish, with a few exceptions, highlights. And then paragraphs 13 and 14 talk a little bit about the reviewing aspect of that. So what we'd like to do now is open the door to conversation and discussion about your hopes for what the review function would look like. We didn't talk at all about sort of duration and timeline. That is something that we will, of course, need to talk about. And should you wish or be prepared to do so, we would love to hear some of that as well in your interventions. And so with that, if we could perhaps open the floor for discussion on this second part of our taking stock.
With Sam from Canada. Alex, if you could please unmute Sarah.
Ms. Hanna is already unmuted.
Hello, sorry, it's fading in and out. It's Jill Hanna from GAP again. Carissa, I must say I'm having acute difficulty in following this process because I was not on the last call. and your notes from the last call are not up, so it's therefore impossible to know how we were supposed to be doing this. And the fact that all the other paragraphs were not shown on the text, even though I understand we're not making textual changes here, makes it very difficult to know what we're intending to address. So I have to say I'm rather behind the curve. I wasn't quite aware that we were leaping all the way to 13 and 14 right now. So I hope you will indulge me if I make one comment on earlier paragraphs at this point while I have the floor. And that was, I wanted to draw attention to paragraph 4, which talks about it being a review of progress towards achieving the overall vision, the objectives and the targets, whereas paragraph 1 doesn't mention the vision. And I think it should be important that the two of them are aligned. Which way they're aligned perhaps needs discussion, but it does seem odd not to have them aligned in the same way. And I would also like to agree with Felix of Switzerland about the need to show that the stakeholders are fully involved in this process, and it's not just that they're required to produce information and they're not really consulted in drawing up the national report, because in some places that's the flavour that's given. On the question of reviewing, I think it will be, GAP thinks it will be important to understand how often the international conference will meet, because that was going to have a big effect on how paragraph 14 can work. So GAP is not giving an answer now, but we would certainly think that the reviews could not take place any more frequently than the international conference met. And because we're finding this process rather difficult, I wonder if it would be possible for those of us who haven't quite understood how it was to work could also be allowed to make comments until the date that you mentioned. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bill from GAP. Yes, so we did in our kickoff meeting last week talk about how we were hoping to stay combined. So I'll be able to attend that session. Our hope was, as noted on the schedule, to have sort of an open discussion about the sections in general. We are of course happy to take your views on all paragraphs at any time. The reporting piece does generally fall between paragraphs 1 and 12 with some exceptions. And of course, I don't think that there was coming out of IP3 a structure that allowed what went forward from the Bureau to differentiate all the right pieces in all the right places, which does, of course, indeed make it difficult to look paragraph by paragraph. We are of course welcoming of your comments on any paragraph at any time. We are trying to use this not to talk about specific edits to the paragraphs, just for that very reason that there was not a particularly full discussion of the actual words on the page at IP3, and therefore we feel that some organizational structure does need to be given to the comments. So in terms of, I guess, your request to add to additional comments, I think if you have additional overarching comments that would go to the flavor of what you would like to see in these sections, that those could be submitted. But we are hoping to take the input that we got back today and to come back to you with a proposal for sections G and H that would perhaps make it easier for us to have a more cohesive conversation about what we want to see, and of course based on the input. Okay. So we are not looking for specific written comments on this between now and our next discussion for folks that were on the phone. But of course, if there's something that you would in particular like to share that isn't sort of a red line of text that we expect to move, we would of course welcome that. So let's see, I think next on your list, Nalini, was, we've heard from Sarah. Jill, you had called on someone.
So we have Sarah Vasilios from Germany, Andrew from the US, and then Andrea Rother.
Okay, hi, can you hear me? Sarah from
Yes, please go ahead. Can you hear you clearly?
Okay, first, just to follow up on the last, Johannes, I think we also had understood that written comments would be open to all in the next period. So that, I don't think that was particularly clear before this call. So we developed our input for today's call based on that understanding. So we would like to present our written comments after, understanding that you are not asking for specific text edits. So also just in the scheduling today, of course, I took the floor early and I mentioned that I had some additional sort of overarching comments, but we've sort of skipped those areas. So if I could just quickly mention those. First, I think it's already been mentioned that although maybe not specifically, that the current wording in the whole section seems to emphasize government reporting as a key means of taking stock of progress. And we believe, of course, that, and we would like to emphasize that all stakeholders have a contribution to make, and therefore reporting and gathering information should be requested from all stakeholders. With regard to governments, and certainly because as a national focal point, I've been at the center of developing the reporting for Canada. While reporting can be an effective means to assess progress, minimizing that reporting burden would be key to ensure effective and consistent reporting by governments. And to date, the reporting rates have been low. I think this is a challenge that has been seen in many different fora, but for SICAM, it has been low. For reducing the reporting burden, we could achieve could be achieved through leveraging data and information available through complementary processes, as noted in paragraph G12B, before the reports are requested for governments, to help ensure that reporting requests do not duplicate info already available. And we'd also like to make the point that reporting should reflect both the incremental and cumulative nature of progress, and take into account the nature of progress will differ depending on the starting point and the type of stakeholder, whether it be industry, government, or civil society. So we're not constantly asked to report on the same information every time. As an example, in the reporting before in SACAM, each time we were asked, do we have legislation on such and such, or have we ratified or joined an MEA? I think once we've reported that, we shouldn't have to necessarily keep continuing that, because that just adds more burden. So I think that's it at this point.
Thank you very much. Yes, and all right, so maybe we should just understand about the process. I think we put up paragraph 1 in hopes that that would stimulate discussion, and we probably should have included a broader range of paragraphs to be clear what we were taking comment on. So yes, I think, again, general comments, things that you weren't able to raise in the call today, we would welcome those. We would encourage, please, or request not specific line edits, given our intentions in the draft schedule to come up with a proposal for you to consider in our December meeting. I forgot the date, maybe perhaps December 3rd. Anyway, somewhere around there, we have a meeting where we are going to go back to today's discussion and look at a proposed text, and we will have an opportunity there to do, as we often do in a contact group, to look more carefully at a word-by-word assessment. So yes, I believe the date that we set as a deadline for those who were not able to participate to provide input was November 15. We would ask that if you do have general comments that you want to submit in writing, that you would do that by November 15. So thank you. We're happy to open that up. Next on the list, I believe, is Germany. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, Carissa. We are prepared to give specific comments to all elements according to your schedule, the bullet points we have before us. But if this is not possible to do it in this meeting, we will be happy to share them in written form after the meeting.
No, please go ahead.
I would first think of addressing what we have on the screen, which is the paras 13 and 14, the reviewing. And to that, my first remark, sorry, I hear some echo. I don't know what's the reason for this. I didn't have this in my first intervention. Apologies. I hope it can be improved somehow. Thank you very much. So my first remark on para 13 is that this provision seems very similar to text which is to be found under institutional arrangements in a compilation of recommendations. Section A, there are the functions of the International Conference are listed there, and there is a text, a provision 12, and we think that there is quite an overlap between this para here, 13, and the text under institutional arrangements. So it might be a good idea altogether to rather delete this here, and if anything substantial is missing in the other text I mentioned, it could be considered there. So this is a point for consideration of the group. And now regarding 14, we are generally fine with this. We are a little asking about the formulation regarding the reference to the 2030 agenda. The language here is possible at the same time as the review of the 2030 agenda. It's not very clear to us what is this exactly the same time. This is a parallel ongoing process. There are many questions on the reviewing of the targets under this regime of the 2030 agenda. So we think we could perhaps provide a more flexible language instead of saying at the same time, rather use something like possibly in conjunction with a 2030 agenda. So these are my comments on these two bullet points, and if we go through the others, I will be happy to share as well. Thank you.
Just you followed up again a little bit. So we have Andrew Clark, Andrea Rother, and Hadi Guiz from UNEP.
Thank you very much, and hello to my colleagues. So we have had a discussion before about the need for having a review panel or a review body that would receive the reports and review them. And obviously there would be other mechanisms that this review body would do. But it seems that we have lost that discussion of having a review body, a panel, a scientific panel. And I agree with the previous speaker that perhaps it should be under the institutional arrangement section 5, where there is then discussion of having this review body or panel. And there has also been a suggestion that if the IOMC was given different mandate or support, that they could possibly act as this intergovernmental review panel. But it feels like we've lost that discussion that we have had at IP3, and I would like to put it back on the table that we do need to have a review body or a review panel for these reports, and whether it falls under this section or section under the institutional arrangements 5. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated. I think we missed perhaps the United States before you, and I also just want to note, Suki, I believe earlier in the conversation you yielded the floor, but noted you had comments that you might want to come back to. So Nalini, if I could ask you to open the microphone for the United States, and then Suki, if you would like to follow, I'd like to come back to you. We made note of that. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And just keeping an eye on the time. I know you noted that you want to move to the next section soon, so I will be quite brief. And these comments are in reference to the review section. So looking back at probably back to around paragraph 10, just noted that we do agree that the review should take place. But we think that it is important that it focuses on overall progress rather than focusing on individual countries or stakeholders, and it should be designed to measure the agreed objectives of the instrument. And then just another note on, as we look at the text, I think that was correct that there are a number of areas in this text where maybe we're repeating things from other parts, either earlier in this section or possibly other sections of the text as well. So we think it would be, it'd be useful to go through and maybe kind of clean that up and streamline that where possible. And then just we would also want to make sure that anything in the review isn't duplicating any other efforts. So I think that's all I have on this section. So thank you very much, Madam President.
Thank you so much. Suki, can I come back to you and just check in with you and make sure that you have an opportunity? And then Nalini, do we have anyone else on our list? If not, I do think it's time to perhaps close this portion of the discussion and move to section H.
Yeah, just have the last from UNEP, Hadi, please. So after Suki, we can have Hadi.
Thank you so much.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can.
Hadi, sorry, we're going to floor first.
Thank you.
Hadi?
Thank you, Chairs. Our intervention from UNEP is on timelines, because on paragraph 2, if I can take you back a little bit, it talks about reporting to the international conference on paragraph 2A and B. But on paragraph 14, it jumps all the way to paragraph 14, which talks about reviewing or reporting around the same time with that of the SDGs. I don't know how you want to take up this, but it might be a little bit problematic. I think we need to be very clear on timelines about reporting if we want to make progress. That is one. And the second one is that UNEP is kindly requesting Secretariat to highlight in future those areas where the different parts of the instrument might be talking about the same topic to avoid parallel discussion. Also, just to remind that we know that this is the process that should not be penalized. but to support and to help as well. Thank you.
Who next?
Thank you. Perhaps, Suki, perhaps you didn't have anything you wanted us to come back to, but if Japan would like to take the floor, now would be the time. And if not, perhaps I can turn the conversation back over to Tirapon and we can move to section 8. Japan? Okay, we can follow up when there is needed. Tirapon, can I turn the conversation back to you? Excuse me, to move to section 8.
Thank you, Carissa. Okay. Mariana, could you please turn to the slide on section H? Mariana, do you hear me? Yes, thank you. Now we turn to the section H, mechanism for updating the framework. It is on the page 14, not 16, 14 of the document IP4/2. Could you please go to the next slide, please? Yes. This section provides the key processes for updating the framework if it needed to do so in the future from time to time. And it includes the process and timelines that the should be taken into account for the updating. And then it also mentioned about who should create the mechanism for updating and how it should be. Next, please. And then they also the proposed text for the amendment or updates, and definitely the formal adoption of the process, and how to outreach them to the stakeholder and provide sufficient time for consultation on the proposed amendments. And lastly, definitely about the budget, how to provide for this mechanism. These are all the elements in this paragraph, in this section, and I would like to ask of you, does this sufficient or suitable mechanism for updating the framework? Or if it's not, what should be the key elements for the mechanism, and who should be should do this, and how to do this? So now I would like to turn the floor to all of you for your views and comment on this section. Could you please go back to the first of the previous slide? Now the floor is open for your comments or view on this section, on this paragraph.
We have a comment from Argentina, from Augustine Hart. I've just unmuted Augustine, if you would like to actually take the floor.
Sure, please, Argentina, please.
Thank you, Nalini. I'm sorry, but I wrote in the chat because this is regarding the previous item agenda. But just to mention that Argentina is working on written comments regarding the evaluation of effectiveness of this new framework, and I pointed out in the chat three different aspects that we are tackling. First, the usefulness and the necessity to have this evaluation framework, possible arrangements. I heard comments regarding the discussion of a body or a group, could be more political, could be more scientific, but there is a need to establish certain arrangements to develop this evaluation. And finally, one of the things which I didn't hear much is the development of a baseline. If we want to measure progress, we need to know where we started. And there are some really good documents on the evaluation of SciComm that has already been done. But once we have a clear pathway of the indicators and the objectives that this new framework will have, we will need also to develop a baseline on where do we started from the 2020, or decide which will be the starting point, so that we can really evaluate after that the progress. So these are things that Argentina would like to provide in written before the 15th. Thank you. Thank you, Nalini, for giving me the floor.
Thank you very much, Argentina. And anything do you have for this section, the section H? So if not, so any list of the participants to take the floor, Nalini?
So I don't see any hands or anyone asking for the floor in the chat. If colleagues could just enter in the chat message to everyone, make sure you press. So we've got a request from Jill Hannah. I will unmute her.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Co-Chair. I'm sorry to come in first on this section. I didn't intend to. I meant to come after governments. I just wanted to check, are we just looking at what you have on the screen, or the whole of this paragraph, which was two screens? My comments, GAP's comments really apply more to the other bits, but we would have a comment on one small Roman 2, which is that the Global Alliance on Health and Pollution thinks it would be important to stress that whatever the mechanism is, it needs to be multi-sectoral and multi-stakeholder. In other words, the overall access to this mechanism must be for everybody who takes part in the ongoing process. Thank you very much on that one. And if I may, I will also address the question of amending the overall Beyond 2020 framework. Obviously, it is, as stated in paragraph little Roman 4, for government stakeholders to propose amendments formally to the framework, but we in the Global Alliance think it would be useful if, as is done in conferences, other stakeholders could propose amendments which might then get taken up by governments. So we would want there to be a system for all stakeholders to make proposals for amendments to the Secretariat, and for those to be visible to all. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Who is next?
Next is Vasilius from Germany, followed by Jacqueline Alvarez from UNEP.
Okay, EU, Germany, on behalf of EU, you have the floor, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Co-Chair. We have a general comment on or question on this whole section on mechanism for updating the framework. So it seems that again here there is some overlap with the functions of the international conference under institutional arrangements. There is very clear and specific language there, which is very much related to overseeing implementation, reviewing progress, and taking action. So without wanting to get involved in the details of the particular items here in this whole section, we would like to flag this. If this is further discussed, we do need to ensure that it is coherent with other parts of the text. And we will provide some further comments on this too. Thank you.
Thank you very much. EU, and then who next?
We have Jacqueline Alvarez from UNEP,
okay.
followed by
UNEP,
Andrew.
please.
Okay.
Yes. Hello. Thank you again for the opportunity to comment on this. We have mainly some questions and some concerns regarding this process. The first one relates to, it says a process for updating sections or the totality of the Beyond 2020 framework, and we would like to seek clarification what that includes. As discussions are ongoing and will be happening also within this virtual working group on multi-stakeholder engagement, and maybe later as well in the discussions about composition of bureau and all of that, I wanted to understand a little better if this will also imply the rules of procedure for the new instrument or not, or if it is the text of the new framework, because it says Beyond 2020 framework, so it's not talking about the past. So that's one question. One concern is the use of the word must in this text, and we understand in this section, and we understand the importance, but the must gives maybe a perception that it's not the correct one. And my last comment goes maybe into the other slide, the one that you have there, because it's interesting to see the delegation of authority, and if you can show that one, the delegation of authority aspect that it's the group that can be established can have. So it's also very important to consider what that delegation of authority really implies, because it's not for making decisions, but as it is written, is kind of very, very clear about it. The other thing is the aspect of what is triggering an update of the Beyond 2020. So the first part of the paragraph as well in the previous slide, and sorry for going back and forth, is quite confusing. If there is a need to, and if you see experience, for example, in the Stockholm Convention about how to trigger amendments to the convention, it's kind of, there are other elements or the of the need is clear, is more clear. Here it's very vague. Thank you for the opportunity to make a comment.
Thank you very much. I think that this section is provide the mechanism for update the Beyond 2020 framework in case that we needed to do so. I think maybe after we got the new framework in ICCM5, and After that, when we implement it and we see what the new information or something happened that we need to be changed or amendment of the framework, this is the mechanism that provide the process that to update the framework, the Beyond 2020 framework. This is the purpose of this section. And for the trigger that you mentioned, I think this is the thing that proposed for the mandate of the ICCM international conference to do this job, to make the decision on the update and after that to be adopted after we agree. And this is the for that mandate. And any other request for the floor?
Yeah, so Jeremiah, we have Andrew Clark from the US, and then Andrea Rother are following him.
Okay, US, you have the floor, please.
Thank you very much. Just to speak to this section and to updating the instrument, we do believe it's important for this instrument to be flexible and to be able to adjust to new challenges as we move forward. So we do support some kind of mechanism to allow for updating the instrument as needed. And we do agree that the ICCM should be the body calling for any needed update through its resolution policy. I'm sorry, resolution process. However, I think that in the chapeau of paragraph 1, I think as mentioned previously, saying this will occur when there's a need to keep pace with changes. I mean, I think that is our intent, but I also think that we would probably want to have something a little bit more specific than that. I think it would be very hard to understand when we have gotten to that point where there's a need to keep pace with change. And I think that there could be, with such a vague guidance there, that could be hard for us all to reach agreement on when that point has arrived. So we would suggest that it might be more useful to include some kind of comprehensive evaluation that would be a way to determine the need for any updates, and that an independent consultant could take out this evaluation, and then that would be something that the ICCM could use to proceed, to decide whether or not to proceed on an update. So I think that might be something like that would be a better mechanism than leaving it to too much to, I guess, subjective judgment on where we are. And I think that we would, for doing these evaluations, I mean, that's something that I think we will have to discuss. We would want to think carefully about how frequently we did do them, and make sure that we're doing them in a frequently enough that we are able to know when things are changing, and making sure that we are adaptable, but also not doing them so quickly that we don't have time to make sure that they're very thorough, and also that we're able to take the time to consider each evaluation as it comes in, and adapt based on what it says. And then finally, I want to note that as we look at the updates to this, we think it's very important that the text reflects that there is such a strong connection between this section and the previous one, that it is important that any updates grow out of measurements of our progress that we do through the implementation of section G and the reporting and review process. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Who is next? Nalini.
So Andrea Rother has the floor.
Okay, you have the floor.
Thank you. This is Andrea Rother from the University of Cape Town in South Africa. I have a question for clarification, and that is, how would this text fit or work with the rules of procedure that were adopted by ICCM 2. And if you look in the document IP4/2 in table 1, it's raised that we should be reviewing the rule of procedure. And so my question is, should we be having separate text here about updating the framework, or should we also be reviewing the rules of procedure to assess whether the text should be there or complementary? So that's my question. Thank you.
So it looks like there's no one else asking for the floor. There's nothing in the chat box either.
I think if it's necessary, if we agree on this section and it affect to the rule of procedure, maybe it's I don't know. For the time being, I cannot maybe not make myself clear as well. What is the process if this section affect to the rule of procedure? Maybe it's something that we have to think and consider. To maybe it's possible to amend the rule of procedure as well, or we have to think about it later. Thank you for listening this point. So no one else for to take the phone now.
Not for now, not on this topic. So perhaps we can go back to the other discussion on section G.
Yes, I think that if the comments are all in on H, it would be a good idea to go back to G, which had a little bit more breadth of issues that were raised. So, and I do notice there's some chat about the baseline going on in the Q&A in the chat box. From our colleague from, I believe, Pakistan, talking about supporting some of Argentina's points. So again, just to note that we are watching that chat box and dutifully taking notes. I understand your technical difficulties and appreciate your input in that manner. So if we could go back to section G, we have another 20 minutes or so. We do have a couple of concluding issues we would like to raise. I think we had hoped to also talk about sort of what's in paragraphs 2 and 3. So if I could ask you, Mariana, to move to the next slide. So again, we're going back to G, which is in the compilation text on pages 12 and 13. And we are looking at our third and sort of final set of guiding questions. We had divided it into 3 sections in our intro. This talks about the roles and responsibilities of the different bodies. And I think perhaps the EU was the first to raise this, but I think Chairperson and I in our own assessment noticed that there also is a significant amount of overlap between the text in paragraphs 1 through 12 with the roles and responsibilities that are presented in paragraphs 2 and 3. So maybe it suffices just to note that, you know, we see that as well. And we agree that in order for there to be clear reporting lines and clear roles and responsibilities between the conference, the secretary, or among the conference, the secretariat, and the stakeholders, that we need to give specific attention to ensuring that there is no duplication and that there is clarity. But outside of the duplication and the lack of clarity, are there any thoughts on the substance of what you would like to see those roles and responsibilities be? So if there's any thoughts on that, we would open the floor for discussion. looking here at paragraph 2, you will see that the International Conference is tasked with receiving the reports and disseminating the information as appropriate, evaluating and reporting on the implementation. I'm just looking, that would of course include the targets and the milestones, objectives and indicators that we've been talking about, updating the program of work, which of course would go to the sections we were just talking about. So that I think from our perspective, those are things that would fall into the management of the international conference, and the Secretariat, of course, would manage, as it always does, the reports that are coming in, the compilation, preparing it, sharing it, etc. So if there are those kinds of comments, if there are additions to those roles and responsibilities, we would appreciate hearing from you. And it looks like perhaps Argentina is asking for the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Carissa, Madam Chair. And yes, we would like to echo what you just said and some other parties have raised. We do see an overlapping of responsibilities, and I think that could be a good output of this group to have suggestions for a clear mandate of the different and relevant bodies. I don't have at this moment a concrete suggestion on that, but I do agree that some overlapping is happening with the mandates of the different bodies, and we should address that as well. So I agree with that this could be a good output from this group. Thank you.
Okay, so Carissa, we have Vasilios. I don't know if you wanted to take the floor on this, or it was from your hand was up from the previous session. I didn't see it go down, but after Vasilios, we have Jacqueline Alvarez.
Thank you, Nalini. My hand was up and I couldn't get it down, but anyway, it's okay. I'm fine. Very shortly. Yes, we do see very big overlaps of 2 and 3 with institutional arrangements, functions of the conference and the Secretariat, and we wonder if we do need these paras here. So would rather could live very well with deleting them. This is something for consideration because these items are clearly covered in the other text. Thank you.
Jacqueline, could we turn the floor to you, please?
Yeah, okay. No, my comment was in the same lines of Vasilios from EU right now on maybe assessing if this 2A and B should be here or in other places, but also looking at the roles and responsibilities in general. These two things look back, and the conference should also look forward in triggering processes, in making other decisions, not only looking back. So those were the 2 comments from you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I note some support from Colombia for comments raised by Argentina that I believe would also go to some of the comments made from the EU and UNEP. Thank you so much. Nalini, next on our list.
So no one asking for the floor, but we have a comment on paragraph 2 from Mr. Kwaja from SDPI mentioning vision, not mentioning targets. So Carissa, I think if you just put your on mute, yeah, it sometimes echoes a lot. Okay. Comment on paragraph 2, only limited to mentioning vision, not mentioning targets, which helps moving forward progress at national, regional, and international levels.
Thank you. Duly noted. Okay. So I think perhaps that covers our breadth of comments on paragraphs 2 and 3 and in general on the roles and responsibilities. We've heard some good ideas for our next look at this section, and thank you very much for that. So I think we have, let's see.
We have Andrew Clark from the US who's got the hand up still, but it could be from the previous session and has had trouble putting it down. So Andrew, I don't know, I've unmuted you in case you need to take the floor.
Yeah, yes, I'm sorry. That is an error. I tried to put it back down, but it seems to have popped back up again.
Thank you so much. So we do have just a few more minutes before we turn to sort of our plans for next time, et cetera. So going back to some of the earlier sections in G, let's go back to the guiding questions, which I believe you had on slide 2. Thank you so much. So the way we had hoped this would sort of unfold, and I recognize that we did have some process issues on our part by not having all of the guiding questions up when we started our discussion. So my apologies for that. We will sharpen our skills for next time. But I think we did cover quite well in your interventions, paragraph 1. So thank you very much for those. We looked at paragraphs, basically 4 through 10, the key building blocks and sort of the beginning of a discussion on what we would want in terms of information being presented. The process and duration for reporting, which comes out a little bit in paragraphs 11 and 12. We did not spend too much time talking about that. So I would note that paragraph 12 has more detail, but a lot of redundancies with what we talked about in paragraphs 4 and 5. But if you do have some further thoughts, perhaps on paragraphs 11 and 12, the process and duration for reporting, that would be helpful. And maybe I could ask Mariana, would you turn to the slide that has paragraphs 11 and 12 laid out? I'm going to forget the slide number, but soon, yes. So there was the concept introduced of each country should be reviewed once every 3 or 4 years in the text. And it would probably be helpful to talk just a little bit about that. That is something that would be new going forward. We currently do not have in our reporting structure a process that reviews countries. So that might be something folks want to spend a moment on. And then looking at 12, just looking at my notes, there is a sense, for example, that there should be regular reporting, that there should be a process for that reporting to be assessed. The frequency is not something that we talked about very much. And I guess what I would say is that for now, I think what you should expect from us in our proposed draft is that every X years would continue. So I think we need to look, as someone mentioned in their intervention, at how often the ICCM is going to meet, where we could get direction, et cetera. But you might want to start thinking for our December meeting and going forward about what that X years might be. I suspect we will have some colorful discussions about what that time frame should look like. But if we could spend a few minutes just talking about what you would want to see in terms of process for that review and the reporting that would go into that review, looking at paragraphs 11 and 12. We could open the floor for just a few minutes if you had given those two questions, the question in these particular areas some thought. So again, focusing on this paragraphs 11 through 12. And Mariana, maybe you could just switch to the next slide so people could see the end of paragraph 12. It is quite long. We talked about minimizing reporting burden. That seemed to be generally a theme that a number of you have mentioned today. Being useful. So the ad hoc review of activities is something we didn't really touch on and how that might work. We did talk about the importance of being inclusive. And I heard a number of folks talking about their being sure that all stakeholders are held accountable to their commitments. And then maybe the next slide is just the end of 12, as I recall. Could you flip one more slide, Mariana? Oh, great. Sorry, I'm wrong. If you can go back to yep. So there's 12, and then back one more to 11. Beginning. Sorry. Thank you. Perfect.
We have Vasilios, that is representing EU member states, asking for the floor.
Thank you. Vasilios.
Thank you, Carissa. On behalf of the EU and its member states, regarding para 11, we have many questions on the meaning and implications of para. It's not clear to us the purpose, who will review, who will consider the review, so a lot of technical things to consider. The way it is right now, it's probably not very useful. We could live quite well without this formulation on para 11. As regards para 12, you already raised the basic question on frequency. We think this is something important. Frequency should be in alignment with the frequency of the future conference. We would think that we could suggest to have it at least every 4 years. That seems to be quite workable. And we think that there is a need for amendments. Some amendments we will provide also in written form on this para. Most basic is the question on key targets. Not very clear on the definition and implications of these key targets, and related to this, the whole item 1 where progress against key targets should be measured every X years and so on. This is something that we would rather have deleted because we don't really or understand the purpose of this here. So these are our comments on these 2 paras. Thank you.
And please, over, we have Andrew Clark from the US. And Andrew, I am unmuting you.
All right, thank you, Nalini. Yes, thank you for giving me the floor again. I think this, if we're looking at these 2 paragraphs, I think one thing that we would like to flag first of all in paragraph 11 is that to us, I think that having a periodic review of each country seems perhaps maybe too ambitious. It seems like that would be quite a large undertaking, and I think that we would want to be very cautious about trying to proceed on such a large undertaking. If we're doing every country every 3 or 4 years, that seems to be like an effort that could be very all-consuming and could potentially really pull us away from actually implementing this new instrument and achieving our goals. Regarding paragraph 12 on the process, I think that in general, there are a lot of useful elements here. I think that we would, on some of the specifics, we would want to offer some text edits at a later time. But I think that generally, we think these are pretty good as they're laid out. We do see a few things that maybe are not clear, and we certainly would want to not want to go through and make sure that any of the process here is as I mentioned before, like we don't want to do any duplicating of effort here. So I think that our overarching view of looking at this process for the reporting and for the review is that we're not we are getting the information that we need, but we're not asking so much of countries and other stakeholders that we won't end up being able to achieve what we hope to with this reporting. Thank you.
And we have a comment from Mahmood Khwaja from SDPI on paragraph 2, section small 3. Rotational basis would require priority issues varying from country to country, both in intensity and proportions.
Thank you, duly noted. Okay. So I think we are getting close to the end of our session today. So we wanted to sort of wrap up by obviously thanking everybody for their participation today, but in particular to thank the Secretariat for your tremendous support in making these meetings work, and to remind everybody that we do have a couple of upcoming events with respect to this virtual working group. In particular, by the end of the day today, your electronic input on sections B, C, and D related to the mechanisms to support implementation is due today. And as I think one of our stakeholders noted, there is, of course, a relationship between that and the topics that we were talking about today. So we look forward to seeing your thoughts on those sections. We did provide some, I think it was a PDF. Actually, Nalini, I can't remember exactly how we posted it, but a PDF of what were the outstanding questions in those sections. Those sections, unlike these two sections that we've been talking about today, were much more developed at IP3. We had very specific issues that were left either undiscussed or undecided or bracketed at IP3, so your input could be much more targeted with respect to those sections. We do recognize that today was a little bit, it was harder, I think, to move forward or to feel like we're moving forward because these issues in G and H were not well developed at IP3, and we don't have the text that we would normally have in a contact group to sort of focus on. So we appreciate your patience as we tried to figure out the best way to get input today. We will obviously make some adjustments to that going forward to see if we can provide a little clarity of process. I would note that our next our next electronic input is due today. Our next virtual meeting is going to be held on Thursday, November 19. And we have three things that we're going to try to accomplish at that meeting. One is we're going to review the compilation of comments that we received in a process that we will facilitate on B, C, and D. And we're going to try to summarize what we heard. We're going to try to propose a way forward in that text based on your detailed comments that we will hopefully be getting by the end of the day today. We will have and then we're going to switch gears to our other mandate, which is the science policy interface. And we will have a readout from the Secretariat or a technical briefing on its work from UNEP on that. And then we will have an open discussion on the science policy interface. So for those of you that perhaps missed our kickoff meeting last week, where we talked about how we hoped today would work, I'll just take a few minutes here to say that we would like to have an open discussion on the science policy interface after UNEP's technical briefing. We do not have any text. We were not left with any text from IP3 on the science policy interface. We did at OEWG3 and a few of our other meetings have some very general discussion about the science policy interface, but we hope you will come prepared on the 19th for about what I would hope to be would be a 30 to 45 minute conversation on how you see the science policy interface, what you think the role and responsibilities could be of our Beyond 2020 instrument in that area, and get a conversation going such that, again, we can start to think about how we would capture that conversation in our instrument in terms of text going forward. That will be followed in, I believe it's January, with a more detailed conversation about the science policy interface. So that will be part one, and then which is an open discussion, and then part two will be a much more focused discussion. So, Nalini, if we have any questions from the floor, we could take. Today, written input between now and November 15, and to the extent that you have general comments or you weren't able to make your comments today, we would welcome that by November 15 as well. But again, please caution on, we do envision that that what we have currently in front of us is not text. So we would hope that you could give us more general comments on your thoughts.
Carissa, sorry, Felix has been wanting to take the floor, but somehow I don't see his request. So apologies for that. Please, thank you so much all for your patience, because we are kind of trying to manage many different chat boxes and etc. And we'll get better, I'm sure of it, as we go along. So I've now unmuted Felix from Switzerland.
Thank you very much, and sorry if I don't know what happened, why you couldn't see my comments. Perhaps also I did something wrong. We're all getting better on those with those tools. I'll just make a very short comment on para 11. I think it was good to have a short discussion about it. In our view, a review process can be a very effective and helpful tool, and we would like to keep it. However, I think it will make a lot of sense to think further and think broader how it can be best done. Because Andrew mentioned a good point, what should be the sequence? Should it be for all countries? Should it be voluntary? What are the roles of stakeholders? A lot of questions around. I would be very much interested to discuss this further with other countries, other stakeholders, to think about what could be a good concept for such a tool. And then just, Carissa, thank you very much also for outlining the next steps. You were a bit too fast for me. I was too slow, perhaps. Will this also be provided in written form, those next steps, so that I can also share it easily with my colleagues? Thank you.
I wonder if you can just show again the schedule, which is online, and you can then walk through that.
That would actually be exactly what I was going to suggest. Thank you. So Mariana, I think you're looking at page 3 of the schedule that we reviewed at our kickoff meeting, and it is opportunity number 5, I believe.
Mariana, can you try and make it a little bit bigger?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yes. So maybe actually, if you could just start, and I'm sorry, I just asked you for number 5, but would you actually show number 3, which was today's discussion? Thank you. So if you scroll to the bottom, you'll see very bottom, we talked about those unable to participate in the working group will have until November 15 to submit written views. I think we've now sort of agreed that that will be a little bit more of an opportunity for those who didn't have a chance, perhaps, or didn't understand how we were going to run today's process, to submit comments. And so then if we move to the top of page 3, the next page, that is a little bit more open than we had perhaps envisioned. Again, so that number 4, please note that it is November 15 for that date. And then 5, here's what we were talking about next steps. So numbers 1, 2, and 3, the review of specific text on pages B, C, sections B, C, and D. That is the comment that is due to, those are the written comments that are due today as electronic input. So we, with the assistance of the Secretariat, will compile all of the comments that we received by the end of the day today, and we will look for opportunities to, as President Soller has directed, to make progress and move forward on those sections and tee them up for further negotiation at IP4. Then we are going to have a technical briefing on the science policy interface from UNEP. I believe they have written a report or put together some thoughts on the science policy interface that they will be able to present. And that will be followed by an open discussion like we had today on the science policy interface. We will not have the benefit of what we had today, which is at least some ideas that came out of IP3 related to reporting and reviewing and taking stock. We don't have anything that came out of our earlier discussions on the science policy interface. For your thoughts, your general thoughts, and again, like we had planned for today, for anyone who's unable technically or for whatever reason to not be able to participate in that open discussion, they will have an opportunity to provide written input. And then I don't know the exact date, but as we scroll down the calendar, we will come back to the science policy interface sometime in December or January. There we go. Yep, there's the due date, December 18, for those who weren't able to participate in the open discussion that we were going to have on the 19th of November. And then one more page down, and you will see that our focus discussion on the science policy interface will occur on Thursday, January 7th. And we did leave this a bit open, further steps to be advised. And we did this because we are waiting to sort of see what your views are on the science policy interface in our open discussion on November 19th. So hopefully, Felix, I hope that gives you a little bit, or at least something you can share with your colleagues in the Swiss government as well as the rest of you. But those are the next steps that we are planning. And with that, I think I'll ask the Secretariat if there's anything else we need to cover. And if not, my apologies that we've gone 8 minutes over. But thank you for your views, and we look forward to moving forward in our next meeting on the 19th. And enjoy the rest of your days and nights today. Nalini, over to you.
Okay, so you got a compliment, co-facilitators, for your great sharing and preparation for this meeting.
Oh, I don't know, that might be generous, but we're going to work on it.
Thank you, Hans Christian. That's it. I think we've covered everything.
Great. Then Cherapan and I will look forward to hearing from you all over the next 10 days or so, and to seeing you again on the 19th.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye. Take care.
Bye.
See you soon.